recording. Welcome to Art in the Raw. I'm your host, Ann Kelly. Our guest today is Talia Kosh. And where are you today?
I am in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in my home.
Talia is a musician, and she's also the president of New Mexico Lawyers for the Arts and a practicing attorney as well. So very diverse.
Yes, there's actually a lot of attorneys in the world and in New Mexico that are also musicians. It's probably so that we can stay sane.
Just having creative outlets, I feel like, is such a valuable thing for the human species, and especially these days.
Especially these days.
Yeah.
Because we're cooped up, and mine as well, right?
So you've been playing music for quite a while, it's
been about 10 years, and I was playing out with, it had more of a rock band feel to it for a number of years. I'd say like 4, and then I started only playing with guitarists, primarily in piano lounge venues like Vanessi's, until COVID hit. And, I've had a few online concerts since then, and I have some pre-existing and already recorded music that will be coming out soon. So that's good. I'm glad that I got into the studio before COVID hit to do all of that. And still work with Robert McCormick, who is one of my, the guitar player that I work with. So that we'll be doing a couple, maybe a little less polished versions of some of my songs, but I think they still sound really good. So yeah, it's just a readjustment for all musicians in terms of, what the future looks like, because this is not going away anytime soon. And sort of the touring life and the playing out life is dead in the water right now. So, I think we're all re-educating ourselves on what kind of equipment we need, and, how important social media is to artists now more than ever before.
So the band is called Golden General.
Golden General, which my brother called me growing up. It's a Dragonlance reference, and she was a character in that series, a minor character, but she was the only one that could save the village from the dragon that was ravishing the land. And then she transformed into this character, the Golden General.
Well, I kind of feel like that's what music and art is now.
Yes, it has that transformational element more than ever before. Yeah,
absolutely. And you write original music, but you also play some covers as well, and you play the ukulele.
I do. I primarily play the ukulele, a little guitar, but I find that the ukulele is really good to write songs on. For some reason, it just makes the creativity flow. Maybe it's just because you can pick it up so easily, and you can carry it with you everywhere, and it fits in the overhead bin. This may end up being an advertisement for everybody getting a ukulele, but that's okay.
Well, they've kind of increased in popularity, as I understand it.
Yeah. Actually, our friend Jamie Bob, she just told me that she picked up a ukulele the other day, and is already starting to play songs on it. It makes music really accessible because there's only 4 chords.
Easier than toting around a giant bass or something like that.
Yeah, or a guitar. Yeah.
Even a guitar. This is actually kind of a funny thing. My neighbor, who I don't really know, seems to be practicing the stand-up bass in her house right now.
Oh, perfect.
Not loud enough that we can pick it up on the speakers, but it's happening, and it's appropriate. So
I love it.
We'll bring her over. So before the current situation, you were playing a lot of live shows around town, but simultaneously recording the album that you were mentioning.
Yes.
And
it'll be an EP.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be 4 songs, and it's been a long time coming. I think it's like with any artist, you can just keep working on something. And then there's the album art, and then there's just choice after choice after choice. So at some point you just have to pull the trigger.
Right.
So that's where I'm at right now.
And then early in the current situation, you played online as part of, it was a benefit for the bank?
For the Food Depot.
Food Depot.
Yes, through or with SantaFe.com set that up, Hutton Broadcasting, Band Together, that's what it was called.
That was
and we raised a nice little bit of money that day. That was nice, and it was a great way to just kind of get everyone together. At that point, everybody was still really in panic mode, and nobody was going out anywhere in New Mexico. So it was really nice to see everybody online.
And then you recently, or maybe it wasn't that recent, but you played as part of the Ghostlight sessions at the Lensic.
At the Lensic, yeah, that's a great series that the Lensic has. Since they can't utilize really their space right now, they're bringing in mostly local musicians to play on the Lensic stage, which I'm sure that's a lot of our dream, is to play on the Lensic stage. Not many musicians get to do that unless it's a special event. So that was exciting to be up there. It was very bright in my eyes, and I was just hoping that it turned out all right, but it did. I thought it was a good set that came out of that, and it's great that they're doing that. And everybody should check out their Ghostlight sessions, because it's just an ongoing series.
I'll put a link to your portion of that in the YouTube description. But that must have been crazy. I mean, obviously you weren't in there all by yourself, but compared to what the Lensic is normally like, it must have just been crazy just to be in there almost alone.
Yeah, I mean, we're just 2 other people with 1 take, and so yeah, a little nerve-wracking, because it's going to be shown to the world. But it turned out great. It was really fun to be up on that stage.
So I was looking back on that article that the Santa Fe Reporter wrote about you. Was it about a year ago, when you were playing at the Nessies pretty regularly? And I kind of missed this the first time I read the article, and it mentioned that you sang it as part of a gospel choir when you were in college.
Yes, yeah.
Which makes sense. You listen to your music, I can see that inspiration.
Yeah, and that was in Charleston, South Carolina. And it was a choir of about 100 people. And I was the only white girl, and it was amazing. And when I auditioned, the teacher said that I sounded like some other person, and he held his heart, and that just made me feel really good. So it definitely was an encouragement to keep going.
And then years later, you got the ukulele as a gift from your dad, and that's when you started writing music regularly. Do I have that?
That's right. And then years later, I discovered, my dad told me just randomly that my grandfather owned multiple ukuleles and would play them. And I didn't know that before then. So it kind of runs in the family, apparently.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
I inherited the love of music.
I want to buy a ukulele. I'll go with you to get one.
I was thinking about it. Okay, so this is a kind of a funny rabbit hole I've been down this week when I've started doing these conversations, and I didn't really know I was going to do this. I started looking up or just kind of researching histories of things that I would not have done. But I started looking up the history of the ukulele, because I didn't know anything about it, and I was curious. And it turns out that it was there was a very similar instrument that I'm forgetting what it's called right now, that came from Portugal, and it was a Portuguese sailor brought it to Hawaii, and then the Hawaiians invented the ukulele based upon the large population of Portuguese people that were moving there. And that's interesting. Like early 1900. or so.
Wow.
So
I didn't know about the Portuguese connection.
yeah. And then earlier this week, completely unrelated, I was having a conversation with another friend who was introduced me to a genre of music I wasn't familiar with, which is fado, which is basically Portuguese blues. So he had sent me a few links earlier this week, and I thought, oh wow, I really really enjoyed it. I don't think he knew how much I enjoyed it. And as I was reading more into this and started thinking about, okay, the origin of the ukulele and the Portuguese and that whole combination of it, I went into that yeah, fado was a music movement in Portugal in, I don't know, 18 something or other. And so my friend who introduced me to fado, I actually sent the link to your Ghostlight sessions, and he really loved your music and said he could sense a
Oh,
little fado in it. So
cool. I have
that's,
to check that out. I love that.
I'll send you some links after this, and kind of the whole thing, I guess, with that. I mean, you figure it's blues, but like so many things, it's kind of that combination of and I think that's how he ended up sending me the link. We were looking at a picture that we thought was both beautiful and sad all at the same time. And so I don't know. It's kind of interesting.
The different influences that start to come out.
Yeah, exactly. And where different musical instruments came from, and just kind of how different cultures influence each other. So I'll send you some of those links after this
No,
conversation.
I would love that. And the other thing I find about ukuleles is that once you buy one, you want to keep buying them because they're all so different. And there's different sizes. Like for example, this one, I was on a year waiting list for this one. It's made out of sycamore wood,
Wow.
and it's by the Maya Mo Ukulele Company. They're out of Oregon, which is going through an unfortunate time right now. But and this is a tenor, so there's two sizes smaller than this, and then there's all different kinds of strings you can put on it, and it can get really fun. So it's definitely, I'm an advocate of everyone having a little ukulele.
And how many do you have now? How many have you collected?
I have two kind of electric ukuleles, and then maybe 3 or 4 acoustic. A couple of them don't plug in. One of them is my grandfather's. It's a soprano, and it doesn't stay in tune, and it's really hard to play. So I just kind of leave that up on the wall.
But how wonderful to have that. That's
Yeah, yeah.
And I've seen you can get lower end version ukuleles for
Sure.
not a whole
They
lot.
it is harder for them to stay in tune, and the more often you play it, it's kind of like a car. You just need to keep it, likes to be driven.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You don't want to keep it sitting idle or unused, because then it kind of becomes worthless, like a bike or a car.
Before the current times, as we're calling them, you also played a number of house concerts as well, in addition
Sure.
to,
I'll still play a house concert.
if
If
it's
you
set up
want me to,
properly,
I'm
right?
ready.
How is that experience different for you?
There's some people that just play house concerts. There's some musicians that prefer it, and I liken it more to like being in Vanessi's or being in a piano bar where people are there to hear the music instead of in a bar where there's a TV behind you and people could care less really if you're there or not. It's a drastic difference, and even though sometimes the crowds at Vanessi's were small, I still came to prefer it to a late night show in a bar. Um, and thinking about that, and in light of this new COVID world, there are a lot of opportunities for more intimate settings, right? Or like even what Debbie's doing with So Far Santa Fe.
Yeah, and you
And
played one of those.
yeah, I played
Shows.
with So Far Sounds. For people who don't know, yeah, check out So Far Sounds in the city that you're in. They've kind of transitioned right now to like online intimate concerts, but it's an intimate concert concept where you have to sign up before and you have to pay for tickets before, and the venue is secret and you don't know where you're going to go. And in some larger cities, it's very popular. And it's a hit. People love not really knowing where they're going and not knowing who they're going to see. In Santa Fe, that's been difficult because people aren't used to that fresh concept and want to know who it is, and they want to know where they're going, and they want to know what part of town it's going to be in. And it's funny to break through these barriers that.
Yeah, I'm glad I went to one of the last ones that Debbie put on here in Santa Fe at our mutual friend's house. That was early on, where I think she kept it a little smaller. I'm glad I went. I'm gonna have to bring if she's up for it. I'm gonna have to bring Debbie on here to talk about because it's a very cool thing. New Mexico Lawyers for the Arts. You're the president, you're the founder as well, aren't you?
I'm the founder and president, and when I first came back to New Mexico, after living in DC for a couple of years, where there was a year waiting list to even assist with the pro bono attorney network there that worked with artists, they're volunteer lawyers for the arts. I came back here and discovered that there currently wasn't one. There had been one, and then it shut down. And anyway, it had this kind of strange history. But with the support of some other nonprofits like Creative Santa Fe, and Tom Augustin was a part of that at the time, and I started to get into helping arts-related nonprofits, and then formed New Mexico Lawyers for the Arts, and it was primarily clinic-based and education-based, and it still is, and got that off the ground. And we still have a couple of pro bono clinics a year, and it is interesting trying to keep a nonprofit going on the side, for so long, because what is interesting and what people don't understand about that kind of nonprofit work in terms of what it did for me in my career, and what I try to explain to new attorneys as well, is like putting yourself out there and doing some pro bono work is actually the best kind of advertising that you can get if you do it in the area that you want to receive more clients, because your name is just going to spread like wildfire. And especially in Santa Fe, that everything's referral based. Mm-hmm. We live our world in a referral based way here. Yeah, it helps to advertise, of course, but that's just not the way that Santa Fe works. And so
kind of a more creative form of advertising, it seems to me, and a way to just provide such valuable assistance to people that might not be able to afford to hire someone, or just wouldn't think to do that. And then just all things you're really passionate about to begin with.
Yeah. And so it definitely took my career more in that direction. And then in 2016, I started working more with Meow Wolf, and that really has taken away a lot of my time to be able to devote to the pro bono aspects. But it truly is needed more than ever now. I'm also on the intellectual property section of the New Mexico Bar, and we have a pro bono legal clinic coming up in November that will be online, which is the first time that we've ever done this online. It's a great experiment. We've been kind of building this relationship in the last 3 years with the law school to have a clinic where law students can actually participate and shadow attorneys. Well, we can't do that right now, but we can still help people in online clinics. So I'll share that on New Mexico Lawyers for the Arts page when it happens, but that'll be in November. And it's a great idea. I mean, I don't know why, you know, you start getting into like all of the reasons that we didn't do things online or virtually before, and none of them make sense anymore. Like somebody was just posting that kids aren't going to know what snow days are anymore because there's no excuse anymore. It's over. I'm glad that we got snow days. I feel sorry for these kids nowadays. They're never going to get another snow day. But I mean, it's the same.
Eventually.
I think with attorneys, we felt like so much of our work had to be in person, but at the end of the day, it can all be virtual. I know some firms that are going completely virtual. They're not going back to a brick and mortar space. And that is incredible. That's an incredible concept. And it, you know, there's a lot of ups and downs to that, but we're back to that adaptation question and answer.
So you can be on the chairlift this winter if the ski area opens, and potentially just fit in meetings.
I just need to get Ray's booster.
Yes. There you go.
I don't have an internet booster yet.
Yeah, no, I know the booster.
So you get that from me, and we'll do some pro bono meetings on the chairlift.
There you go. Well, and you've put on a lot of different panel discussions, and I mean, you one of the things I admire about you is there's just certain things that you clearly have a passion for. It's kind of amazing the number of just different things that you engage in because you're in it for the love. Because putting on those panel discussions, and then we did a few years ago at Photo Eye for photographers, but you've also done a lot of work for, and those are still up on Vimeo, I discovered the other day.
No, I know if you go through the pages on Google enough, they'll come up.
It will, exactly. And then the film industry, you've done a lot with the film industry as well.
I am. I'm currently on the Governor's Council of Film and Media Industries in New Mexico. It's a brand new, or it's a new council. They're all pretty much fresh except for a couple of us who have been on for a number of years. But yeah, an interesting time for creatives right now in general, because production is still on hold right now for the most part in New Mexico. And there's been a number of white papers released, and things will start getting back into production soon. But yeah, I mean, it's all going to change as to how that happens, because there's going to have to be someone assigned to really monitoring all of the health and safety concerns and mandates from the state. So it's definitely an undertaking for productions these days, more than ever before.
Which is when it helps to be a creative person.
Yeah, that's true.
Something I've been giving thought to recently, and it's not my original idea, but I've come across this idea in multiple locations recently, which is if you're a creative person, you're just a creative person in all avenues of your life. It's not limited to just playing music. It's going to extend into being an attorney, or you're creative. And so it kind of makes me wonder, just in your law practice. But
I think that there's some aspects of the work that I do that is creative. Mm-hmm. But I think that law is limited in a way in terms of the creativity that you are able to express. It certainly is limiting, which is why I'm trying to go kind of in some alternative directions compared to the typical law firm track that just doesn't necessarily completely jive with those creative aspects of my personality. And so, yeah, in that way, it's about seeking ever new ways is kind of my motto. But just generally, and seeing and witnessing this, since March, with COVID, is that, you'd think that there is so much creativity being generated still, but in some ways you'd think that there would be lots more being generated. And it's an interesting thing to kind of break through the paralysis that can come with all of the fear that's in the world, and all of the transition and change and uncertainty, and sadness of not being able to connect with other people like we used to, and not being able to go see live music, and all these things that we used to have as outlets aren't there anymore. And so it can cause a creative paralysis, that then we have to break through. And it shifts over time, and it comes in waves. But I think, the important thing is to not be hard on yourself if you're going through that creative paralysis, because it'll just make that stunting even worse.
I think there was that thing in the beginning where certain people felt like, okay, I've got this extra time. If I don't remodel my entire house and clean out all my closets, I'm failing.
Right.
Failing. And not everybody was able to do that. And I've been lucky to be working throughout this whole thing. So I've not had time to clean out my closets, which I feel very blessed for that. But I think we need to be less hard on ourselves. Because maybe in theory there's extra time. I don't know, is there extra time? Or I think even just being in a position where you feel like you have to do something, not helpful for the creative process. You must write this thing now. We need a new original song by next week.
Because all of a sudden you have this time doesn't mean it's going to come. It's just going to happen naturally. I mean, it's almost easier to be crunched for time for some of us, because we work under pressure better. So it can actually be difficult. I found actually that time feels like it's going by faster, and I don't know why, because we all have more of it. It's the strangest thing.
I felt like it slowed down and then it sped up again. I have no idea. But normally I would be probably at a yoga class right now, but I've just...
But now you're starting a series.
Yeah. So, hey, there are positives. We'll see what happens next. And there was a little bit of anxiety about starting the show, and just the time, and am I really going to do this? And but I decided, yeah, I'm just going to do this, and we'll see where it goes. And worst case scenario, I have some interesting conversations with some interesting people, and we put them out there, and that's that. Or I keep doing it. We'll see.
Yeah, and either way it'll lead to the next step. And that's also where you can get hung up, is again trying to get everything perfect before you're there. Then you're just never gonna do anything. So yeah, I think it's great what you're doing.
Well, thank you. So would you like to play a song for us? And you write your own music. You also do covers. Are you gonna play an original or a cover?
I thought just for copyright purposes, I'll play an original.
That makes sense. Well, and you write some great...
Although it would be so different that it wouldn't be flagged on YouTube. You wouldn't have to... But we won't do that yet. I wrote this song a number of years ago, and played it at Felicia Ford's wedding. It's one of the only songs that I have that's actually like playable at a wedding. Robert and I coined this. I didn't really have a title for it, so we call it Air Balloon. Cool. To the beat of your heart, I have waited. To the beat of your heart, I have to my dying day. All I felt like mountains away, but now you're here with me. You pull off closer to me. All I felt like mountains away, but now you're here with me. You pull off closer to me. You pull off closer. You pull off closer. You pull off closer. You pull off closer. Oh, and your hot air balloon. Take me away with you to your sky of blue. Oh, and your hot air balloon. Float away with you into your sky of blue. And when the wind blows through and rocks your air balloon, I'll hold on tight to you. And when the wind blows through on a great descent tide, pass my time with you. I'll be here on your shores making castles. Don't you agree how quickly time passes? All I have felt like mountains away, but now you're here with me. You pull off closer to me. You pull off closer. You pull off closer. You pull off closer. You pull off closer.
Yay! Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So technology, I mean, how amazing is it that we have that going for us?
Thank
Right
goodness.
now.
Could you imagine back in the 90s when we were in college and we could it took 30 minutes to download a picture? You couldn't even look at porn back then.
It would take a very long time.
You had to work for it.
Yeah. But like the last pandemic 100 years ago, can you imagine? There was, that we couldn't do this, obviously.
No.
But so that was something else I was thinking about the other day, is just technology and kind of the ability to do kind of more DIY style anything, whether it be music, YouTube shows, anything like that.
Yeah. And it's more and more important for artists to acquire those skills. And that is my passion, is to continue teaching and to, build a business that addresses artists kind of in their, they have a business and they want to expand it and continue towards success. And it's very hard to figure out how to successfully expand and scale your business, especially as a creative. And you really do so much need that legal and business advice at just the right time. And often it's just hard to know who to go to and the expense. It's sometimes the last thing that you budget for, but it can really head off a lot of issues if you are building your business correctly at the beginning.
And
Or
not,
you know how to adjust it correctly when you need to.
and a lot of creative people, they don't have the business mind. I mean, there are some people that have kind of the business mind and the artistic mind, but that's not everybody. And then
Well, but I think it's more so with these younger generations, because it's like I find, not to focus on age, but there is that resistance in artists who are a little more seasoned or older, that it's kind of like I can't do that, I don't do that part, whereas there's an openness to learning everything they can about the business aspects, and just an ease being a digital native with the online world, and understanding how important it is to be living in that digital space.
so you describe your music as indie post-punk, which
Yeah.
both, as I understand it, maybe you could talk a little more about that, but both are kind of come from that kind of DIY space.
It's kind of garage bandy feel. It's an attempt to explain my music, but and I think that that's true of it when I'm playing with a full band, which will be what my CD is. But it's not like always this danceable, necessarily easy listening thing. It's not based on it being catchy. And that's been an interesting conversation to have with drummers over the years. But now, because I'm so scaled down with just a guitar player or just myself, the thoughts around what that definition is, of course, is ever changing. And different. I feel like a different genre of music is emerging. So I don't, that was an attempt at it building, some kind of label that people could identify with. But I don't know how easily my music fits into a certain kind of genre.
Yeah, well, I think that description is kind of ever changing, and the indie, independent. You're not waiting around for some record label to show up. You're going out, you're doing it, you're playing the shows, you're making an album. Same with this show. I'm not waiting for, we're just doing it. And with technology, we can do that. When I was a kid, I used to go rent video cameras, and my friends and I would do fake commercials. We'd make up commercials and film them. And so, I mean, I guess you could do that, but it was like, you had to go ask, I had to go ask my mom, would she go rent me the video camera, and what were we doing at all? I don't know. But technology's made it a little bit easier in that way. But I'm glad you brought up the different ways that you've performed, because early on, it seems to me you were, when you were doing concerts, you were playing with a larger band. And then you kind of started scaling it down to just you and maybe one other person. But there's something about kind of the power of your music where it didn't really feel like it had lost something.
Well, thank you.
And scaling down. So
yeah, and I think that, of course, I think that has to do with the lyrical nature of my music. Is that there's still that emotion there, and my work is very lyric based, as well as my voice. It's based around my voice and lyrics. So yeah, I appreciate your recognition of that.
it's just something I.
And you mentioned the commercials that you used to film, and it reminded me of this. I had just put together a couple of relevant um, like art related lawsuits that have been in the news right now, and kind of thinking about what might be relevant to artists right now to be talking about. And of course they're all in the social media realm, but since you mentioned commercials, I thought this one was really interesting, because there was this photographer, his name is Jack Schroeder. um, he sued Volvo this year back in June. And so this photographer had done just a photo shoot, not for Volvo. Volvo didn't ever pay him, but he did it around his Volvo. Um, and then he posted these shots of a model in front of the Volvo, on Instagram, on his Instagram page. Mm-hmm. And then Volvo actually contacted him and asked if they could use his photos, but they weren't going to pay him, so he ignored their request for a license. A couple months later, he sees that Volvo is using his images, and he reached out to the company saying, hey, they sent him an aggressive letter basically saying, we have a right to use this work, because it was on Instagram and your account is public. And this creates a really interesting question around if the source of and getting our work out into the world, whether it's a musician or an artist, is social media specifically, and more focused on Instagram and Facebook. But and these companies are taking advantage of this gray area in the license, alleged ability to sub-license these works based on the fact just that they exist on Instagram, should be frightening to all artists right now. That this is what Volvo is relying on. So then this photographer sued the company, and it's still in process. But again, Volvo said that they have a right, because just on the fact that they're on Instagram and they're allowed to reshare publicly posted content. So then we're kind of looking at, there is a distinction between sharing something and sharing it in a commercial context, right? And I think that's where Volvo is really going to fail here, is that they're not just sharing his photograph. They're sharing his photograph in a commercial context. They're potentially, exploiting him for commercial use. It's not just like somebody's individual personal page sharing a cool repost. Volvo also claimed that he tagged Volvo in his image, and by tagging the company, they claim that he gave Volvo an implied license, which is another interesting concept. Is that if you tag someone, are you giving them an implied license? Kind of fascinating. So we'll see what happens there. But
how recent? This is still.
Yeah, I mean, the lawsuit was only filed back in June. And I think that Volvo was relying on this other case. Let's see, this is against Mashable. Another photographer sued Mashable in kind of a similar situation, but Mashable used one of these photojournalists' photos without their permission. And that image was also on Instagram's platform, and the court threw out the artist's lawsuit based on the same idea that Instagram, because it was on Instagram, the artist granted a sub-license for Mashable to use the work. And then that has recently been appealed and thrown out. So I think Volvo will lose on this, but it is interesting to see the ramping up of, these different corporations trying to exploit artists and not give them any kind of fee. I mean, this one person was, I mean, it's just amazing that people will spend $100,000 on attorneys and not offer artists a licensing fee. It still shocks me, and it's it takes artists like this to actually file suit, because most won't. Most don't have the money. Most didn't register their images in time to take advantage of like the statutory attorney remedy. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting world moving forward in terms of how artists can protect their work and yet still share it, because you can't be afraid. You don't want to walk around being afraid to share your work, because then obscurity is a much worse death to die.
Right. And probably when he, well, I mean, it's hard to know. Maybe when he originally posted the image, he consciously tagged Volvo. Maybe he was hoping that they would want a partner, or it was, I mean, in theory, that would have been, you would think, a good call. And most people are going to assume, or I'm just assuming a lot of art, I don't have the means to go against someone like that. I mean,
Exactly.
like,
And instead of paying the artist a couple $1,000s for licensing fee, now they're paying attorneys hundreds of thousands potentially of dollars.
that's crazy.
So yeah, it is pretty interesting.
And you said there, you'd mentioned earlier there was a few other kind of current cases.
Yeah. Well, George R. R. Martin, who lives in Santa Fe with us, he has some interesting things going on right now. He he filed a complaint in Los Angeles Superior Court against this production company who way back in 2009 was granted an option to the film rights on his novella. It's a werewolf novella. It's a story about werewolves. And then that company, not to get too complicated, assigned that option to another company who are the defendants. They're called Blackstone. So they exercised their option. They had 5 years. So in an option contract, basically, you hold down that intellectual property or that creative property for a period of time, while you try to get the rest of the funding, and then you can exercise the option. And if you don't do it in that amount of time, then the rights revert back to, in this case, the author. So Blackstone had 5 years to start principal photography on the film before the rights reverted back to George R. R. Martin. And this is the interesting part is they did, right before that 5 years was up, they did start to shoot a handful of scenes. And the reason that George sued them was that he claimed that they hastily assembled a bare bones cast and crew the day before the 2019 deadline to shoot a handful of scenes for no other reason than to maintain the appearance that it was making the progress necessary to retain the rights. He said it was a token production. And I don't know if I've seen anything like this before. It's really interesting. So George is going to have to prove that their efforts weren't really real. It was an artifice, which is, kind of interesting because, ironically, he just tried to build a castle in New Mexico and got turned down. Did you read that today?
No, what? Where?
So our historic preservation board, I guess he went in front of them, and he has property up by Museum Hill, and he wanted to build, I think, a castle. He wanted to build a castle for sure, but I think he wanted to build a castle that was a library that would be open to the public, and the historic preservation board denied him.
Well, that would be our historic preservation board in Santa Fe. But wow, that's
interesting to see like the social media comments on that, because some people are like, let him build the castle, and then other people are like, George, it's not Ireland, okay? You can't build a castle wherever you want.
Wow, I love that. I'm gonna have to go look at that later.
Yeah.
No, what do you think? Would you vote that he can build the castle or not build the castle?
I mean, I'd love to see the property where he's going to build the castle. I mean, if it's on Museum Hill, I think it's cool. Let him build the
Yeah.
castle. I mean, it depends on how big it is.
Right. Maybe it's too tall. Maybe that was part of the for those who are not familiar, Santa Fe, we've got our historic architecture, and they're very specific about what you do in specific areas. And so it could have even been like the height or the color,
Or that it wasn't stucco. Like maybe if he slapped some stucco on it and put a reister on the front, they would have been okay with that.
yeah, it's possible. I feel like I would vote in favor of the castle, but I guess, like you said, I would need more information on that.
Yeah.
He opened that place, or Dragonstone, around the corner from, well, both of us, where I guess he's storing a lot of his collection of memorabilia. And I
Oh,
thought that was going to be something that was open to the public. I know it's got artist studios you can rent, but
yeah, and I know that they were trying to build some kind of like commercial kitchen there, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the status of that right now. I mean, everything's changed.
yeah, I think he said he didn't want to run the kitchen, but he was hoping to find somebody to put a restaurant in there. So,
Mhm.
um,
I mean, I think it's great that he's here. It is such a boost for Santa Fe that he is a part of it, and to not work with him, to abjectly deny that kind of request. I don't know. I mean, it's just really interesting that no exceptions will be made, even for George.
yeah, and I guess he's been here for a long time. It's just he wasn't as known as he is now until Game of Thrones, and then more recently Meow Wolf. And but he's been a wonderful contributor to Santa Fe.
And then speaking of Museum Hill, where Forrest Fenn used to live, he just passed away as
I
well.
heard that,
Yeah.
and somebody just found the treasure, so that's a crazy,
Well, and that's my conspiracy theory is like,
right?
somebody just found the treasure just months, not even months before he died.
Maybe a month ago, was it?
Yeah. So like like my conspiracy allegedly is that maybe he knew he was dying and there was something that happened there, because I thought it was a little shady the way that the guy who found the treasure didn't want to be identified. He wanted to be anonymous. There was a photo taken of the treasure. He wasn't even in it. We don't even know anything about where it was discovered. There's just like a lot of shady details, and then all of a sudden he passes away. So I I
It was like a
don't
lot of
know.
people didn't believe it when it was reported that it was discovered.
Yeah. I mean, and people were like, it looked legit, like the stuff in it was aged. But maybe he was like, look, I don't want people like digging my land up if I'm gonna be passing away soon. Like, let me just tell somebody where this thing is.
Mm-hmm. Or if you want to get deeper in the conspiracy theory, maybe he's alive and well and he's on some island with like Tupac and Elvis and
And hopefully not Epstein.
yeah, hopefully not. But you never know. Conspiracy theories.
Never know. Yeah. Interesting. But that Thrill of the Chase, that book, I mean, it kept a lot of people busy for a lot of years.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If anybody's not familiar with that, look it up. It's worth knowing more about for sure. Real life treasure hunts. Any other interesting?
I mean, this isn't so legal related, but it is creatively related. I posted on my Facebook today a film by Yves Saint Laurent. They're not doing the runway this year, of course, but in lieu of that, they filmed this really cinematically beautiful short film that features like cityscapes with their fall men's collection, which was really beautifully done. And I just love, if we're talking about that adaptation uh, answer, is that this fashion house is adapting to this world by creating this stunning short film, featuring their collection with a story. And it has potential that they wouldn't have explored if not for this tragedy that we're all in right now. And it could be like the future of how new collections are released. I mean, it's kind of groundbreaking. And I remember years ago, just looking at like companies like Marriott and how that they were reallocating a large portion of their advertising budget over to film and making films and making stories that people can relate to, instead of making your typical, putting it into print advertising or putting it into, some kind of, commercial that is going to disappear. Is just to have a film that has some kind of storyline behind it that people can relate to.
So yeah, I mean, that's an amazing example of something which seems to me to be a positive thing coming from all this. That I'm gonna go to your page and I'm gonna read about that. That sounds
Yeah, watch it. It's really good.
Yeah, I love that, because I mean these times they're stressful. They're trying. There's so many things. But I'm the way I am keeping sane and happy and inspired is by just trying to push my creativity as far as it can go, and just tuning into other aspects of the world that I might not have otherwise. I've researching the history of musical instruments and how different cultures have been influenced by them and how they've shared that. And last week I was reading up on the history of stone fountains. I mean, there's some amazing things in this world. So we should definitely be aware of everything that's happening in the world. But I really think that throwing in the mix some beautiful creative things is really good for just your well-being and mental health. So that's part of my motivation for this show.
Well, I love that you're doing this, Anne, and I so appreciate you having me on.
So before I let you go, there's I have a new favorite question that I've been asking everybody on this show, which relates to collecting. And so we already know that you collect ukuleles. Is there anything else interesting that you collect?
I mean, I collect art. I have a lot of art that I collect that I don't even have room up on my walls for. Mm-hmm. So I would say art. I would say makeup. I would say blush. I collect blush. I'm really into cream blushes these days.
I love it. And I think that's the thing in talking about collecting art and not having space for it. I feel like when you're really collecting art, you're not, I mean, sometimes that's the case. You're like, I have a 30 by 30 inch spot to the left of my bookshelf that I want to hang something. But I feel like when you're really into collecting art, when you connect with that particular piece, and maybe you don't have a spot for it, you feel like you need to have it anyways. That's my experience.
Agreed. Yeah, it's not going to stop us.
No, it will not. Well, maybe in the coming months we can meet back up on here, and maybe we'll know what happened with those particular cases. That would be interesting to follow up on.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I'm kind of feeling like you need to meet Zach, who is my friend, who's the DJ from episode 2, who works in music copyright in LA. So we're keeping the show fluid. We'll see where it all goes.
Back to the future moment.
What's that?
Let's do a Back to the Future moment at some
Yes,
point.
yes. Let's do that. Ooh, and one other question. Are there any what you would call classic movies that you've rewatched recently that you found to be as good as or better than when you watched them the first time?
I revisited Matrix and the Inception recently,
Nice.
getting ready for the new Matrix that will come out sometime soon. Especially after learning that the Wachowski brothers, who are now sisters, that there was a major subtext message of on the issue of transgender in the Matrix storyline, and that it was in a way really about that experience. Watching it from that expression and like having that information is kind of an interesting experience.
Yeah, you kind of get to rewatch it in a different way.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for playing the song and for joining us. And if those of you out there watching, if you enjoyed this conversation and you want to know about future shows, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the little bell, follow us on Instagram and on Facebook. We really, really appreciate your support. This is a brand new show. This is only the 4th episode, so we're early on. So tell your friends, follow, all that good stuff. Super appreciated. Send us messages. Let me know what you think. And have a good night, everybody. And thank you, Talia.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Artintheraw. Bye.
Look forward to seeing you soon.